So, over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've become extremely angry over this whole New Shepard thing and Blue Origin, as all of you have noticed. However, this episode isn't about Blue Origin, but rather the focus that the media has on them and the big names in spaceflight, whereas they're completely ignoring extremely important and relevant issues that are happening at the same time. For example, this year so far, probably the most popular online space periodical has run 17 articles about Blue Origin, a company that has yet to reach orbit, and yet they have released only one article about these guys. This is footage of a full-duration test of the Firefly Alpha rocket, or rather the engines that power it, and the total thrust of this rocket, its main stage, is 165.5 thousand pounds of thrust, or more than 50% more than that of New Shepard, and it has a second stage. The result? This rocket will be able to carry more than triple the payload to low Earth orbit than the Electron can from Rocket Lab. And the price? About 14 million US, which is less than 1/3 that of the Falcon 9. So what you're looking at is a rocket that's about to blow the whole Smallsat industry wide open, and it's scheduled to launch in a little bit more than a week. And yet, have we seen anything about this? Virtually nothing. And next on the books is the Firefly Beta, which will be able to carry a full metric ton to geosynchronous transfer orbit. And does it look kind of familiar to you? Well, yeah, it's sort of a scaled down Falcon Heavy. And how much has this been reported on? I haven't seen anything, really. Regardless of media coverage, Peter Beck has obviously recognized the threat, and we've talked about the Neutron many times. Rocket Lab is probably the one Smallsat company that gets the most attention, and this rocket will be capable of carrying double the mass to low Earth orbit as the Firefly Beta. The question is, are they going to be able to get this in service fast enough? And what about Virgin Orbit? I mean, you can only put a rocket that's so big on a 747, so how are they going to compete long term? Well, they have a plan too, and regardless of how well this is being covered in the media, I intend to cover it in just a minute. Good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Angry Astronaut. Yes, I've been plowing out content for you guys as rapidly as possible. I hope that you enjoyed my interview with Spaceport Cornwall. I am extremely excited about what's happening there. Until very recently, I thought that it was going to be pretty much only about Virgin Orbit, and now Sierra Nevada and the Dream Chaser is also going to be involved in what's happening there, and who knows what's coming next. There is so much happening in the world of private commercial spaceflight these days throughout the planet. It is beyond exciting. And at the same time, it really pisses me off. And I'll tell you why. It is virtually not covered. The amount of coverage that these topics receive is pathetic because the media organizations know, and I can't really blame them for this, that what is going to get the attention, what's going to get the advertisers, what's going to make them the money is talking about Boca Chica, talking about SpaceX, talking about SLS, talking about these extremely big companies that have big goals, big objectives, and I am all for that. I am all for what SpaceX is doing, and I thoroughly believe in Elon Musk's vision and in Starship and in everything else behind that. But the problem is, everything else, well, is not being ignored, but at the same time really doesn't receive a great deal of attention at all. And it really does annoy me. And I do my best on this channel to cover all sorts of spaceflight related topics, space science, regardless of whether it might be popular, whether or not it might get a lot of views, make me a lot of money or not. The fact of the matter is these events, these issues need to be covered. This type of space flight, the less well-known forms of space flight, need to be covered because they are valid and they are pertinent and important as well. And what's going on in the Smallsat world is nothing less than a dogfight, as I suggested in the opening remarks of the video. We have all kinds of companies that are competing in the Smallsat arena, and as micro-miniaturized technology becomes more and more advanced, the capabilities of extremely small satellites and small interplanetary probes become that much more impressive. And so therefore, you can use smaller rockets to achieve a hell of a lot. And this has not been lost on a lot of companies, and they are fighting it out. And in this particular episode, I want to talk about 3 of these companies, 2 of which have gotten a fair amount of coverage, 1 not nearly as much. Virgin Orbit and Rocket Lab and Firefly. And all of these companies are fighting over the same kinds of customers. Smaller satellites, smaller types of probes, including things that can go to the moon and go to other planets. They may not be particularly huge or ambitious, but at the same time can accomplish quite a bit. And all of them are heavily involved in it, and all of them have a different way of accomplishing it. Rocket Lab with the Neutron, they're just simply looking to build a bigger rocket to achieve bigger things, including human space flight, something we never would have expected from them. Virgin Orbit with innovation, using a totally different form of propulsion, as you will see for their second stage, for their upper stage, instead of chemical rockets. That is incredibly exciting. And, of course, Firefly, whose solution is also to start out with a bigger rocket and to build a scaled-down version of the Falcon Heavy. Do you know that a smaller version of the Falcon Heavy is on the books and may be launching in the next couple of years? I'll bet you didn't. Well, you're going to find out all about this right now. So for those of you new to the whole Smallsat thing, here's a little bit of Smallsat 101. First of all, the Falcon 9, even though it costs $50 million to launch one of these things, and that's assuming that you're utilizing a reused booster, it's $62 million if you're using a new booster. It can carry a lot more payload than any of these Smallsat providers. So if you take advantage of their rideshare program, you can get your Smallsat into orbit for less money than a lot of these other providers are charging. So why not just do it this way? Well, there's a lot of reasons. The first problem is timing. You have to launch when SpaceX is launching a primary payload, and there has to be room in the rideshare space of the Falcon 9 fairing in order to send up your Smallsat. So you have to wait until there's an open space, and that can be difficult, especially given that SpaceX is using as many Falcon 9s as they can to put up their Starlink constellation, and also they have a lot of dedicated military missions that they're obligated to undertake. On top of all of this, there are other problems. If you're hitching a ride on a Falcon 9, you are essentially a slave to the orbit of the primary payload. So if the primary payload is heading to an equatorial orbit and you need to go to a polar orbit, you're out of luck. If the primary payload is going to LEO and you need your Smallsat to go to SSO, you're out of luck. So there are a lot of things, if you're in a hurry to get your Smallsat into orbit in the next few years, that may prevent you from using rideshare. Therefore, you need to pursue another option, and there are getting to be quite a few of those. But back in 2017, there was Rocket Lab, and that was pretty much it. But still, Rocket Lab had a lot of potential customers, even though they could only carry 300 kilograms to low Earth orbit with their Electron. That doesn't sound like much, but keep in mind, a nanosatellite can weigh anywhere from 1 to 10 kilograms, microsatellites are anywhere from 10 to 100 kilograms, and mini satellites are anywhere from 100 to 500 kilograms. CubeSats can be quite tiny as well. So Rocket Lab can deploy quite a few Smallsats, nanosats, whatever, to the same orbit using the Electron, and with their kicker stage, which is capable of multiple burns, they can actually deploy satellites to different orbits, and they have a specialty of polar orbits, given that their primary launch pad is located in New Zealand, which of course is very close to the South Pole, thus allowing them to be able to achieve polar orbits far more easily than you can achieve the same orbit from a place like Cape Canaveral. But that's not all. Utilizing an in-house designed and built satellite/spacecraft, the Electron can deliver a 40-kilogram Smallsat all the way to lunar orbit, as is going to be demonstrated during the Capstone mission, designed to demonstrate whether or not the rectilinear halo orbit is going to be a suitable orbit for the Lunar Gateway. This is an incredibly important mission, and one that Rocket Lab is carrying out for just a few $1 million. That is insanely cheap as far as lunar missions are concerned, a very difficult thing to match, and that same little spacecraft that's called the Photon, by the way, can also deliver a 40-kilogram probe all the way to Venus, and Rocket Lab intends to do just that by 2023. This company has accomplished so much with so little, and yet, at the same time, they're getting into a dogfight with a lot of competitors that's only going to get more competitive as the years go by. Now, in my opinion, the most potent competition that Rocket Lab has at this very moment is Virgin Orbit and Launcher 1. This rocket launched from Cosmic Girl, a converted Virgin Airlines 747, is capable of carrying 500 kilograms up to low Earth orbit instead of 300, or the same 300 kilograms up to Sun synchronous orbit that Rocket Lab can get to low Earth orbit. Therefore, Virgin Orbit simply has a superior payload capability, and also the ability to launch from virtually anywhere on the planet as long as you have an airfield that can accommodate a 747. As a result, Virgin Orbit has grabbed customers all over the planet, from Poland to Brazil to the US military to the Belgian military to a new spaceport that's dedicated almost exclusively to their use in Cornwall in the United Kingdom. And of course, I just did an interview with those folks if you are interested in what's going on there. Now, Virgin Orbit's advantages are twofold, and both of those are made possible by the 747 Cosmic Girl. First of all, it serves as a mobile launch platform, as I suggested, making equatorial launches just as easy as polar launches, and on top of that, it serves as a reusable first stage, allowing Launcher 1 to take off from 30,000 feet instead of ground level, therefore allowing more payload to achieve the same orbit with the same thrust. And yet, both Virgin Orbit and Rocket Lab had better look out for these guys. Firefly Aerospace, as I said before, is about to turn the Smallsat industry on its head, assuming that the maiden launch of this rocket goes well, and we'll know that in about a week and a half. Very, very important what's coming up, and these guys are old school. No reusability. They use RP1 and liquid oxygen. In other words, kerosene, not methane. A lot of old school ways of doing things, and yet with new technology, such as far more efficient production methods, lightweight carbon fiber, and the simple ability to use superior power to deliver a lot more payload into low Earth orbit and beyond. The first stage of this super smallsat rocket is powered by 4 Reaver engines with a total thrust, as I said before, of 165.5 thousand pounds of thrust. The second stage is powered by 1 engine called a Lightning with a total thrust of 15.7 thousand pounds. As a result, the Alpha is capable of delivering more than triple the payload to low Earth orbit than the Electron can for about double the price, and 630 kilograms worth of payload to sun-synchronous orbit. This thing, as far as smallsat rockets are concerned, is a beast, and the beta is going to be even more powerful. How does Rocket Lab and Virgin Orbit compete with these guys, at least before the Neutron comes out? I mean, not only is the payload impressive, but the fairing size is huge as well. It gets as large as 2 meters in diameter and 5 meters long. Not very huge as far as general rockets are concerned, but as far as smallsat rockets, this thing is colossal. Assuming that the Alpha was launching 20 50-kilogram satellites in one launch, that means each customer could get to space for about $750,000, less than $1 million to get to orbit. And the Beta, pictured here, will be able to get the same mass to geosynchronous transfer orbit. Hell, even the moon is not going to be too far for this thing. And horizontal launch? That's something in their plans as well. Oh, and by the way, they're also going to be landing on the moon in 2023. Now, Rocket Lab's answer to all of this is, of course, to build a bigger rocket as well, the Neutron, which will be able to take 8 metric tons to low Earth orbit and make human spaceflight possible. But how does Virgin Orbit compete with this? I mean, you can't put a bigger rocket on a 747. It can only carry so much. Well, they have plans to not only deliver larger payloads, but also to deliver substantial payloads to the moon and even all the way to Mars. Now, how are they going to accomplish this? Well, first of all, by adding a third stage to their rocket, but on top of that, a different form of propulsion. On June 1st, it was announced that NASA had awarded a company called ExoTerra Resource a Phase 2 Small Business Innovation Research Award, or SBIR, for the firm's solar electric propulsion upper stage, that it's currently in development with Virgin Orbit and only Virgin Orbit for a new type of propulsion for Smallsat deployment. Now, solar electric engines use solar power to generate electricity, which in turn ionizes an inert gas as fuel and then drives the ions through an electromagnetic field out the nozzle. This system does not produce a hell of a lot of thrust. It's kind of a slow burn sort of thruster, but nevertheless, it's capable of a much higher ISP than chemical rockets, more along the lines of 1300 to 1500 seconds instead of 300 seconds. This new engine will probably be at least 4 times as efficient as a chemical engine, allowing the Virgin Orbit upper stage to deliver 150 kilograms of payload all the way to the moon and 180 kilograms to geosynchronous orbit, far more than Rocket Lab can currently do. Now, granted, this isn't going to be as much as Firefly in the long run, but in the short run, Virgin Orbit will definitely be able to match and in some cases exceed the capabilities of the Alpha, especially as far as geosynchronous orbits are concerned and lunar missions or even missions to Mars. I mean, hell, even SpaceX isn't making alternative forms of propulsion part of their business model, and then Rocket Lab, well, they're not stopping with the Neutron either. As most of us know at this point, they're looking at reusability to reduce the cost of the Electron until the Neutron comes online. And this is a practical experiment with parafoil retrieval of the lower stage of the Electron, to have one helicopter drop the thing and another helicopter retrieve it. And this experiment was highly successful. It's only a matter of time before Rocket Lab begins to retrieve the lower stage of the Electron, and therefore reducing the cost of their launches to a point to where they can effectively compete with both Firefly and Virgin Orbit. Of course, this is a space race that is full of innovation and excitement, and almost nobody is talking about it. Why? Why is Starship and Blue Origin and all of the fighting between Elon and Jeff the only thing that maintains our attention in this world? Isn't there a lot of other exciting things happening in the world of spaceflight? Well, yes, there is, and it's time for us to start paying attention. At least I'm going to. Cool stuff, huh? Now, is it as cool as Starship? Well, okay, maybe not, I suppose. It's not going to be transporting 1 million people to Mars. I agree with that. But at the same time, these companies, Firefly, Virgin Orbit, Rocket Lab, and companies like them, companies that I've mentioned in other episodes, such as the one that I did about British spaceflight, most of those companies are focused on the very same customers. These sorts of things are going to be incredibly important as we explore the solar system and as we establish a permanent presence on the moon. Having the ability to place small sats of, fairly substantial capability into cislunar space is a big deal. And the fact that all 3 of these companies will be able to do this, will also be able to deploy satellite constellations, that's all very exciting, and to be able to do it for a fraction of the cost of the Falcon 9. That's some amazing stuff. Now, of course, Starship is incredibly amazing as well, but at the same time, I have a feeling that Starship is going to be mostly focused on the huge payloads, on the huge objectives, transporting entire bases all the way to the moon. transporting 1 million people to Mars. I mean, my God, I can't imagine how many starships that's going to require, all the refueling and everything else that will be required to eventually transport that many people to the red planet. Starship is going to have quite a long list of tasks in front of it. So there is simply going to be a need. There is going to be a niche for these kinds of companies and these sorts of missions. The smaller scale missions with small sats, with smaller probes that are going to be just as vital to our exploration of the solar system and our exploration of the moon, as well as increasing our presence in low Earth orbit and beyond. If you like what I have to talk about, if you like the fact that I get pissed off that these topics don't get covered enough, you know how to support me. It's all in the description, or if you want, just a like and a subscribe, and I will be very happy either way. So until all 3 of these companies, hopefully, and many others, are completely successful in their objectives, in other words, broadening the scope of space flight and space-related experiments and other things to other customers, such as universities and smaller scientific institutions that could only dream about going to space in the past, until all of these companies give these kinds of customers a chance to reach for the stars as much as the big guys. I urge all of you to stay angry about space.